I still remember the exact second when fear exploded into that truck. The air horn screamed, my own horn joined it, and I started yelling like a man who genuinely believed he was about to die. And in that moment, the man who had made my life hell for 3 straight months finally felt what I had been swallowing every single day. If you've ever been bullied by someone who knew you couldn't fight back, someone who hid behind authority, seniority, or just your need for a paycheck, hit subscribe right now. Like this video, drop a comment, and settle in, because this isn't just a revenge story. This is a lesson about what happens when you push the quiet guy too far. I was 18 years old when I got my first real job. Not some weekend gig or summer nonsense. This was adult money. Early 2000s. Canadian oil patch. $20 an hour with zero experience or education required, back when minimum wage wasn't even $6. For an 18-year-old kid with no safety net, it felt like winning the lottery. The job was called well testing. You hook up pressure tanks and flare stacks to brand new oil and gas wells, then you flow them, monitor them, record the data, and send the numbers up the chain so people who already had more money than God could make even more. It was hard work at the start, dragging heavy pipes, setting up equipment in the mud and cold, but once everything was running, it was mostly watching gauges, typing data into a computer, and making sure nothing exploded. Not bad at all for a first job. Except for Gary. You work either 2-man-hour shifts or 4-man 24-hour crews. 1 laborer, 1 supervisor per shift. Guess who I got paired with? Gary was in his mid-50s. Overweight, permanently red-faced, a functional alcoholic in the same way a rusted bridge is still technically standing. He was lazy, bitter, and deeply committed to making sure everyone around him knew he'd been miserable longer than they'd been alive. He only helped when something was too heavy for me to lift alone, 250-pound pipes, stuff like that. The rest of the time, he stayed in the trailer. Naps. Occasionally waking up just long enough to type a few numbers into a PC and remind me he was my boss. And he loved jokes. The kind of jokes that are just insults wearing a smile. I'm not a small guy. About 6'1" even without boots. Gary was shorter, softer, slower. I wasn't physically intimidated by him, but back then I had a baby face and zero confidence. I'd been bullied long before this job, and my survival strategy had always been the same: don't react. Don't give them anything. Just get through the day. So Gary called me stupid. A lot. Every mistake, every question, every moment of inexperience was an opportunity. The day he found out I'd never used a power drill before, he laughed and said, "Didn't your dad teach you anything?" And here's where I messed up. I told him my dad had only been in my life for a handful of years. The next time I made a mistake, he didn't miss a beat. "No wonder your dad walked out on you." That one landed. It felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my lungs. I called him out on it, quietly, but firmly. Told him that wasn't okay. Like every other asshole on earth, he smirked and said I couldn't take a joke. We worked far out in the country, hours from any real town. Most nights, that meant eating dinner together in small-town bars, because that was all there was. Gary drank a lot. He could actually be personable once he was a couple drinks deep. Like the cruelty needed alcohol to loosen its grip. But the problem was, he never stopped. Every night, without fail. Eventually, it got to the point where I drove us to work in his truck. He got paid per kilometer, $1, sometimes a bit more. We drove anywhere from 100 to 350 kilometers a day. Every day. For weeks. I got minimum wage for travel time. Gary was hungover most mornings. Didn't want to drive. Told me he was the boss. Slept in the passenger seat like a bloated corpse while I put miles on his odometer and money in his pocket. 3 months. 3 months of insults. 3 months of being reminded I was replaceable. 3 months of knowing I needed the job too badly to say anything. I don't react much. I go quiet. I endure. Until I don't. My breaking point didn't come with a scream or a punch. It came during dinner one night, out of town. We were sitting in some dim bar, the kind where the floor is permanently sticky and the locals stare at you like you're trespassing. I said, calmly, that it was pretty lame he slept while I drove his truck and still got paid for it. I suggested, just suggested, that maybe he could kick a few bucks my way. That last hinge snapped. Gary exploded. Insults. Shouting threats. He reminded me exactly how easily he could get me fired. I was young, tired, and emotionally worn thin, and to my own surprise, my eyes burned. My voice cracked. That scared me more than his yelling. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted out. But something changed in me that night. A switch flipped. I started paying attention. Taking mental notes. Looking for a different crew. Because once you reach that point, the point where fear stops protecting you, your thoughts get dangerous. The next morning, Gary was passed out in his usual travel coma. I drove. About 30 kilometers from the site, I saw it. A semi truck pulled over on a highway turnout. Engine running, trucker outside the cab. Opportunity has a smell. Cold air, diesel, adrenaline. I stopped the truck. Gary didn't stir. I got out and walked over to the driver, explained I needed a favor. I told him exactly what I wanted to do. He grinned like a man who understood justice in its purest form and said, "Just give me the signal." I maneuvered Gary's truck so we were nearly bumper to bumper, facing that massive Peterbilt. I flipped on the beacon. The trucker answered with his headlights, and then the air horn. It was biblical. I laid on the horn too and started screaming like the world was ending. "Gunning, Gary launched into consciousness like a missile. His head slammed the ceiling. His body reacted before his brain could catch up, and I am convinced he lost years of his life expectancy in that moment alone. The sound, the screaming, the sheer terror, it lasted less than a minute, but it was enough. He came out of it howling, redder than I'd ever seen him, trying to form death threats through pure rage. I reversed and peeled away, waving to the trucker as we left him shaking. He yelled that I could have killed him. Said he had dangerously high blood pressure. That I might have caused a stroke. I laughed. I told him to calm down. Asked if he couldn't take a joke. For 20 minutes, he simmered between murderous fury and genuine medical panic. I asked if that was his normal shade of red. I laughed until my sides hurt. When we arrived at the site, he told me I was fired and stormed off to call the company owner. 4 hours later, the GM picked me up. Gary wanted the cops. Attempted murder. The works, I told my side. The GM laughed. I got moved to a different crew. Gary never worked with me again. And I learned something important. Some people mistake silence for weakness, endurance for permission, but even the quiet ones have a line. And when you cross it, you don't get anger. You get creativity. If this story hit something deep for you, like the video, subscribe, share it with someone who's been pushed too far. And tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever heard of? Because justice doesn't always come quietly. Sometimes, it comes with an air horn.